Welcome to a new episode of the brand called You. Today we have an old friend, someone I admire a lot, someone who's achieved a lot of success as a professional and as an entrepreneur, Naresh Kumra. Naresh, thank you very much. Nice of you to have flown down from Hong Kong for our show. Really good to have you here.
Well, thank you, Ash. I'm flattered to be on your show. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. Naresh is from IIT Delhi. He's an MBA from Darden. He's worked for Schlumberger, Mckinsey, and Darden. And then he became an entrepreneur with Jmatek, which he bought into and now runs it. And he also runs a very interesting investment advisory firm called La Rochelle. So Naresh, from working for others from 1991 to 2012, where you scaled incredible heights, to working for yourself from 2012, tell us a little bit about some of the highlights of your journey.
Well, Ash, you probably know this better than most, actually, that the last 30 years have been amazing for the world economy. We've all been really fortunate because of technology, globalization, so I've had my share of luck. But if I was to think about the highlights, I think the one common thread for me has been taking the path that was less popular at that time. So the first highlight is my 6 years at Schlumberger. I graduated from IIT with computer science degree in 91. I was 21 years old. And I chose not to go to the US for a master's degree. That was a popular choice at that time. 75% of my classmates from computer science went to US. I also didn't take up a job in IT. As you know, at that time, IT was very, very hard. Still continues to be, actually. And I also didn't go for an MBA right away. So instead, what I did was I got a job with a company called Schlumberger in their instrumentation business. So a computer science bachelor from IIT going to an instrumentation job was as rare as it gets at that time. My first assignment with Schlumberger was in a city called Poitiers, midway between Paris and Bordeaux. My first assignment there was working in R&D of electricity meters. I did not enjoy that. I found the job quite lonely because you're working on computer, writing firmware, or tinkering with electronics. You didn't really get exposure to other parts of the company. So when my 90-day check-in came in with the local HR manager, the local HR manager said, "You must be excited, you're in France." I said, "Well, actually, it's not that different from what I was doing back in college." Mm-hmm. So he was taken aback. So he said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "Is there something else I can do?" He couldn't think of anything. He said, "Would you like to go to the factory?" I said, "Yes." And he was surprised because, as you would guess, the factory was nearby, but it was the other side of town, which is the less nice side of town. And engineers in those days did not want to go work in the factory. But I was very happy. I really enjoyed it, learned a lot. And I think the experience opened up a whole new world of learning and skill development for me that I had no idea. Now, here's how the story played out very interestingly. So a few years later, Schlumberger decided to do a joint venture with Crompton Greaves in India to set up a factory to manufacture electricity meters. So they looked around and they needed somebody from India, young, early in their career, who knew the business and who had background in manufacturing. That was a set of only one, and that was me. So I opted for that option. I moved to India. I initially was a project manager setting up the production, and later they made me the production manager. I learned a lot. I learned how to negotiate contracts, how to do sourcing, how to build a team. I got C-suite exposure to people like K.K. Noria, who was the chairman of our board. He was the CEO of Crompton Greaves. And so I think the learning for me was that if you take the path less traveled, the opportunities might be less, but the availability of people to pursue those opportunities can also be far less. So you can actually have a really good outcome. The second highlight for me was my 6 years at McKinsey. So the first 2-3 years, it was fairly typical. You join as an associate, you work on a variety of different clients, different industries, different functions, different business problems. And then, you
and with McKinsey, you were in the US.
In the US, yes. I was in New York area. So I'd worked in France for 2 years, then in India for 2 years, then back in France for 2 years, and then US Business School, and then McKinsey in New York. So 2-3 years, it was fairly typical. And I think it was year 3, I had just become engagement manager, and I just finished a project working with an investment bank, doing a research report on in the telecom sector on a segment called metro area network, fairly niche. So on a Friday evening, I was packing my bag, ready to go home. I had nothing to do over the weekend, so looking forward to it. And as it happens, I get a call. There's a partner on the other side. He had a time-sensitive project with a distressed asset fund who was looking at, this was after the dot-com crash, 2001, who was looking at buying the debt of a telecom company that was in distress. The debt was trading at 45 cents on the dollar. They wanted Mckinsey help to figure out if that debt was priced fairly or it was too expensive or too cheap. And they gave us 5 days. So we had to make a presentation the following Friday. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I never heard of a project at Mckinsey that was less than a week. So I said yes. There goes my weekend, right? So, but anyway, as luck would have it, the presentation, which is actually going to be a call, not even a presentation, moved from a Friday morning to Thursday evening. So it was less than 4 days and the weekend. So, I had to take a very different tact because, given the situation. So instead of doing a whole holistic sort of market, industry research, comparative analysis, I worked backward from the question. I said, okay, they want to know, is the debt priced fairly or not? So I said, what are the key drivers? So I worked backward. So the day comes, I make a presentation. I only have 2 pages. The typical was that when you make a presentation to your clients at McKinsey or for any consulting firm for that matter, you have a 100-page document. You have lots of work, right? I had only 2 pages, right? And the client was super happy. My answer was 45 cents of the dollar was too expensive. The right price was 20 cents to 30 cents. And here's my reasoning. And, I could see the immediate financial impact. And that opened my eyes. And afterwards, I pursued a lot of work in private equity. I think in my overall 6 years, half my work must have been in private equity or with entrepreneur-led companies. And I think that experience was critical when I closed my management buy-in into Jmatek, because I think it was because of that experience, I had this thought, I had this idea, and I had the experience on how to go and close and negotiate one.
Yeah. So before I move to Jmatek, you were one of the young leaders globally in 2010, recognized by Forbes. Why did you want to be on your own and not continue in the corporate world? I mean, with that kind of recognition at a global level, very few people have that.
Well, thank you for the kind words. I think I was at year 5 into McKinsey, and consulting is after business school, as you know, Ash, is considered the postdoc. After MBA, when you don't know what you want to do, you go to consulting. So that was my story. So I was in year 5, and I'd just become an associate partner, and you have a 2-3 year windows to get elected to a full partner. And I wasn't excited about the idea of being a consultant for the rest of my life. The problem was I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
So, like everybody else in those days, I used to get headhunter calls. I would go for interviews. I would get job offers. And typically these were big companies. And I just wasn't excited about that idea. So I was lost, actually. So one day I was reading the Wall Street Journal, and I saw 3 ads of 3 different career coaches, right? And, it was a small ad, and it would say something like, looking to change career or looking for a rewarding career, give us a call, something like that. 2 were in New York City, 1 was in Boston. I made the call, and I went and met all 3 of them. I didn't know what to expect. Finally, I selected the firm in Boston. It was called Tom McNeil Institute of Executive Resources. In those days, I think they changed their name. It's called MDL Partners now. So I went and met with them, and I finally signed up. So their approach was very interesting. For the first few months, they just spent trying to understand me. They didn't tell me what to do. They had me go through a lot of psychological testing. They had me go through a lot of deep interviews trying to understand my background, where did I come from, why am I here, all that kind of stuff. And then they made the recommendation. They said, Naresh, you should be a business owner. I said, okay. So I'm a consultant working for a paycheck, and I should become an employer. How do I do that? The challenge is, I've never run a business, and I don't have the capital. And I think this is where I felt that sometime, and actually oftentimes probably, getting external advice from good people is very valuable. They said, Naresh, let's lay out a path for you. First, you should go work for a mid-cap or a small cap. And they said a company between $500 million to $1 billion. So in US context, it's like actually a small cap. And they said, when you go work for a company like this, you can get to run a business a lot sooner than at a bigger company. And because you'll be higher up in the hierarchy, you can actually build some capital through a bigger cash incentive and bigger equity incentive. All of that was learning for me. So I said, that kind of makes sense. All right, let's go find. Headhunters never call you for those jobs. I spent 15 months looking for something like this. And finally, I found a company called Belden, which in those days was $1 billion. And they had up until that point they had incredible brand name. It was diamond and rough. They had subpar performance and growth and profitability. They had just hired a new CEO, young new CEO, ambitious CEO from a company that I highly respected, a company called Danaher. And I had an opportunity to be the first new hire on the leadership team. I heard the story and I knew this was it. So I was lucky. I got the offer and I immediately accepted it and joined. So that's sort of how the journey came about. Yeah. And I credit where I finally ended up to TMIER and the people there who gave me excellent advice.
Wonderful. Then you moved to Jmatek in Hong Kong, and that's where you live now. What does Jmatek do?
So Jmatek is a global leader in portable air cooling. That's a bit of a mouthful. Basically, we design, manufacture, and sell evaporative air coolers, portable air conditioners, and dehumidifier. Evaporative air coolers are a very interesting category. It's energy efficient, environmentally friendly air cooling. It's a category that's very attractive, and the company actually has built a really good reputation globally. We do business in 70 countries today. We manufacture in China and India. We have offices in several countries around the world. And the company is 12 and a half years old, and I was lucky I joined when it had just completed 5 years. So I've been involved for just over 6 years now.
And you got in with a management buy-in. How does that work, and what would your thoughts be on people who may want to do something similar?
That's a great question, Ash. And actually, when I was thinking about what my next step would be, and I knew that I was going to do Belden for some years and eventually become a business owner, capital was a big challenge, right? So, the typical path when you think about when you don't have capital is to go get a financial partner. So, thanks to my, those 3-4 years at Mckinsey, the private equity network. So I had been, building that network. I had built that network in Asia as well. So that's one way. I think the path that's less commonly sort of taken in Asia, is actually fairly common in the US, is a professional like you and me, right? Finding a generational change opportunity where a family, first or second time entrepreneur might have built a company, and they're looking to exit the company at some point of time, but not necessarily immediately, right? But they're looking for to take that legacy forward and continue to build that company, right? So if you can find an opportunity like that, build trust, and come up with a good business plan that aligns the interest on both sides, I think that's in my view anyway, I think that's a very interesting way to become a business owner with limited capital. And it's a win-win on both sides. So in this particular case, generally in such a case, what you might do is you're the very first share that you own in the company you would buy, right? So in this case, that's what happened. So I invested a certain amount of money to take certain ownership, and then because you're adding value, you can also earn more equity over time. So that's how this process works. There are lots of different ways to sort of structure this, but that's the general idea, that you lead as a professional. Becoming an entrepreneur, you lead and develop that opportunity and align the interest in the business plan on both sides. And you may bring in some small partners along the way.
Very interesting. So, you spoke about you manufacturing in China. You also set up a plant in India. You've lived in Hong Kong and traveled extensively in China. What are the similarities, differences of doing business in China, manufacturing in China versus practices in India?
That's a very interesting question. So my first manufacturing experience in India was, back when I was 23, as I was sharing, the joint venture with Content Reeves. Yeah. And we set up a factory right close by in Udyog Vihar, phase 1, right around where the Oberoi and the Trident hotels are right now. Bharti Airtel used to be in our neighborhood. They were a young company as well. So, and then my first visit to China actually was in '99 when I was at business school. I went for a business project to Beijing, Xi'an, and a small village, 5-6 hour journey from Xi'an. In those days, when and you've traveled a lot too in China, Ash. So in those days, when you traveled to China, it felt like a place that was frozen in time. Correct. People were not very well exposed. They were very warm and welcoming. They still are actually, but they were not exposed. They were very curious, right? it has changed a lot. So in 2006, when I moved back from the US to Asia, and I started traveling in China, and we built a big business there with 50 sales offices, 5 manufacturing facilities. What I saw was a China that was very different. And I think the two things that stand out for me, and not necessarily different from India in both dimensions, but certainly I think the highlight about China. I think the first one I have to say is the government, right? The government is truly an enabler of business in China, as surprising as it may sound, right? If you want to do business, they understand scale is important. Getting land is easy. You get land which is priced for manufacturing and not for commercial and real residential. You can get land very easily. They'll make it easy for you to set up supply chain, etc. They will incredible infrastructure. And if you face any challenge that they haven't thought about, it's easy to go meet with them, have a conversation, and they will, give you, support you. We recently at Jmatek have been doing a number of things in China. It's just easy to go have a conversation with the government there, and they really do their best to make it, easy for you. I think that's one. And the second one is I think the people have evolved a lot. I'm really amazed with I think at some level, the people in China are no different than people anywhere in the world. Sure. Everybody, as you've traveled a lot extensively, we often talk about that. So people in China, similarly as in other parts of the world, they want to do well in their life. They want to grow. They want to learn. They want to have a good life for their family. It's the same aspirations and insecurities that everybody has. It's no different. Okay. I think what you find different is, I think they're a lot more aware about the world. They're a lot more innovative, as surprising as it may sound. They're more creative, and they're more courageous. I think part of it is certainly the environment, which encourages you, which gives you sort of something to fall back upon. There's a sort of a security, safety net, right? I think those are two things which I find very different in China versus my first trip back in '99 and most places around the world, actually.
Yeah, in fact, I would agree with what you're saying, because when I used to go and see some industrial parks in China, and the difference that I used to see was that the infrastructure was built first, and then manufacturers are invited. And the exactly reverse happens in India, where they give you the land, start your factory, and then you start struggling for roads and power and water and everything else.
Exactly.
Big difference.
I think one thing, since you talked about India as well, so as you mentioned, we are manufacturing in India, right? Yeah. We've been manufacturing in India for about 4 or 5 years now. This time experience manufacturing in India is quite different versus manufacturing back in the early mid-90s. I think it's become a lot easier. Yeah. I think there's still ways to go, and as you know, and I think there's some good effort around that. Yeah. But I think the difference is today, it's possible to manufacture in India, and thanks to GST and a number of other major initiatives, and the land has become cheaper, so that's a great plus as well. We manufacture the exact same model in China and in India. It's the exact same manufacturing facility, infrastructure. It's as good quality here as in China. And believe it or not, it's actually slightly cheaper.
In India?
In India for exports than China. Right. For the first time in my 25-year career, engaging with manufacturing around the world, I have found India to be more competitive. Now, it's not a blanket statement for all industries, all products, but I think today in certain segments, it's possible for India to be a center of manufacturing excellence. Mm-hmm. And I think with the moves that have been taken more recently and the ones that at least are being talked about, I have never been more bullish about manufacturing in India than today.
Fantastic. So now moving into some of your thoughts on being an entrepreneur. As you were building your business, and you've really scaled up Jmatek from a much smaller organization to, as you said, now present in 70 countries. What were some of your key challenges as you were building the business?
The single biggest challenge, for an entrepreneur is always talent, right? I think the big difference between, working for a larger company and a smaller, high growth, company is, in the case of a large company, the systems and processes are the one that keep it going for a long time. You join a company like GE or IBM. They may go through different cycles at different points of time, right? But it's because that brand name talks about a certain system or certain process, and that's what you join, or Pepsi or Coke and so many others, right? In a smaller, younger company, you don't have that, right? So the first and foremost is always the team, the people. And if you can have an entrepreneurial team that is self-motivated, that's passionate about what they're doing, and that has an ownership mindset, that I think is 90% of your job done, right? And then, so that's what we will focus on. I mean, we made tremendous progress, but I don't think that's an area will ever be done, actually.
Amazing. Okay. So now moving into some of your thoughts when you make investments from La Rochelle. You've invested in several companies, and you also mentioned that you invest along with some friends. What are some of the key parameters you look for before you make an investment?
So in terms of, so my investing in sort of the early stage venture area, I've done about over 20 by now, roughly I do 2-3 in a year.
Yeah.
And it falls in two different areas, I would say, Ash. I mean, the first one is, a case where I've known the entrepreneur for a long time. I trust them for their motivation. I admire them for their capabilities and, how they think. And they have an interesting business idea that makes a lot of sense. So in a case like this, I would invest, my interaction starts by, because I really care for the individual, my interaction starts by making sure that I can actually be a good thought partner for them, right? Whether or not I invest. And so I might be a business advisor. I'll ask question, and challenge. And because I have the trust, it's easier for me to challenge because they've known me for a long time. They know that if I'm asking a tough question, it's because I care. So in a situation like this, that's how it evolves. We might continue a conversation for 6, 9, 12 months. And then when they're ready to raise financing, right, I might actually already be engaged on the business plan, right? And, so I might have actually provided some inputs, and then I might help them out to raise financing. So oftentimes in a situation like this, I would probably lead the investment. And so that's sort of the first case. I mean, I would stay engaged, again, for maybe 6 months, 1 year, even longer, in a more meaningful way. And then for a year or two after that, and then, they're on their own, they might follow on with a more institutional round or something, and my job is done. So again, it's more of a coach, and my interest is aligned with the entrepreneur's interest because I really care for them. I mean, my investment is tiny.
Sure.
For them, it's their career. So I tell entrepreneurs that none of the financial investors, their investment is ever as important as your career. You're putting your life into it. So first and foremost, it's caring for you. The second scenario is where I don't know the entrepreneur. Right, and in such cases, I always co-invest with the people I trust. So people I've got to know. I trust their intellect. I trust their judgment. I really admire their network and their ideas. And if they bring an opportunity, I would probably I try to understand about the business idea, but not necessarily engage deeply into the business plan because I trust them that they've done that. And maybe I'll get to know a bit about the entrepreneur, right? Either some research, online, maybe make some calls, maybe have a meeting. And then I trust the person I'm co-investing with them to do that. So that's sort of how it falls. And I think all said and done, it's a lot about the entrepreneur and making sure that they have the right business idea.
So with 20 investments, you must have looked at dozens more, which you may not have invested in. What are some of the mistakes startup entrepreneurs tend to make?
So, entrepreneurship, and Ash, this, I mean, entrepreneurship is a very tough journey, right? It's lonely, it's scary. On one hand, you are expected to be very passionate and committed to your idea. On the other hand, you are, sort of treading, new spaces, new word, and you're learning.
Yeah.
So it's challenging, right? And at the same time, especially I think in India, where oftentimes entrepreneurs tend to be very young and without a lot of work experience, you're also getting a lot of inputs, which sometimes can be misinterpreted, right? So I will just start by saying entrepreneurship is tough business, and I have a lot of admiration for people who do that. Having said that, I think the single biggest challenge I found is people who are so strongly committed to their idea that they don't leave their mind open for experimentation and learning. That might mean a fine refinement to their idea, and sometimes a course correction. And the beauty is in the Silicon Valley world, there's a term called pivoting. So it's not even a crime to change your idea. The word allows you. So I think, while it's good to be passionate and committed to an idea, I think keeping your mind open about other possibilities and changing course when it makes sense. I think people, sometimes entrepreneurs struggle to do that, and I think that's the biggest mistake I see.
Interesting. So within almost 3 decades of tremendous success, what is the secret, of your success in whichever area that you've gone into?
I don't have a secret. I'm sorry to disappoint you. I've just been, going with the flow. I would say there are probably a few, things that have really helped me. I think the first one has to be hanging out with great people.
Correct.
I don't think I learned this. I think I was lucky that somehow it was imbibed in me. And I probably, as I reflect back on my life, I probably have to give credit to my mom. My dad, was in a job where he traveled a lot. And we grew up in a small town where education, let's just say, was not the top priority growing up. So my mom, who was a school teacher, wanted to make sure that, my sister and I paid attention to education. So she always used to say, if you keep good company, things will work out well for you. So, achhi sangat ka acha bhala, So that's what she used to say. And I think somehow I imbibed that. So when I left home at the age of 15 to go to DAV Chandigarh for 11th and 12th, I was lucky. I was with great people. And I think that has just continued. I think I find myself getting attracted to people who inspire me, who teach me, who care for me and who challenge me, because they care for me. So it's easy to trust. Even when they don't agree with the ideas I have, I know that they're doing it because they care for me. And I think that probably is number one. I think the number two probably has been, I've always prioritized learning and exposure over immediate financial rewards. I don't want to say that I've made bad financial decision. I think my sort of belief has been that if you invest in yourself, so if you prioritize learning and exposure, you are maximizing long-term value. So I think a number of times I've taken up job opportunities which in the near term paid less financially, but longer term have worked out well. I think that's probably the second one. Third one I would say probably is being passionate but yet being open-minded. I think that's been very helpful. Last is I think I've been lucky. I've not been afraid to make choices which were not popular.
Sure.
And I think, I've been lucky that, those choices have worked out generally well. Lots of failures as well, but generally well.
Wonderful. So my next question is a question that is like a generic question in all our shows. What is your biggest learning from your biggest failure?
As you know, you don't go through life without having lots of failures.
Correct.
Many small ones and some big ones. So I've had certainly my share of lots of failures. So I don't know if it's the biggest one, Ash, but it's the one I would say that probably troubled me the most at that point of time, and in hindsight has been one of my biggest learning. And this is about joining Mckinsey. So I'll just go back in time a little bit. So I think I was in year 4 or 5 at Schlumberger. So I was 25-ish years old. And I started thinking about what next. And so I decided I want to go to business school. And as I did research, I concluded that after business school, I would want to work at Mckinsey to get broad exposure. As I was saying, you join consulting because you don't know what to do. So I looked at business schools in the US, and believe it or not, I actually called the Mckinsey office in Washington, D.C. to confirm, if they did campus recruiting at Darden. And I was really attracted to Darden. It's an amazing school, case method small, very intimate, excellent teaching. And, that's what I really wanted at that stage in my life, because I was going to business school after 6 years.
And you also sit on their board.
Now, yes. So I'm involved with Darden. I really admire, broadly, I think University of Virginia is an amazing school. I really admire. I think it's a hidden gem, actually. And I'm glad it was hidden gem when I went there. Otherwise, there's no way I was getting it. But anyway, so I joined Darden with the idea I'll go get, hopefully have a chance to work at Mckinsey. So sure enough, I was lucky. I did very well academically. I was very focused. I want to get to Mckinsey. So Mckinsey comes to campus for summer internship. Mckinsey makes you jump through a lot of hoops. And you first go through resume screen, then you have lots of interviews on campus, and finally they invite you for final round of interviews to their office. So I went to Atlanta, 5 interviews, and a lunch meeting and a few breaks. So I've been through 4 interviews. I was pretty sure I've done quite well. And I'm generally feeling excited, but at the same time, I'm a bit nervous. One more, and I'm quite sure I'm going to get an offer. And I think I just overthought it. I went for my final interview. I don't think I was focused. It could not have gone worse. Sure enough, I did not get an offer, and I was devastated, right? Anyway, I come back, things worked out fine. I ended up working for the summer with another top consulting firm, had a great experience. Instead of 1 project during the summer in 10 weeks, I did 2 projects over 12 weeks, so I learned a lot more. I got to go on a cruise to Bahamas, so that was also very nice. And they gave me, they offered me to fund my second year of tuition at MBA, so that was also very nice. So I come back, but I'm still focused on Mckinsey. So second year, Mckinsey comes back in again. So again, I go through resume screen, I go through all of the rounds, and I'm back in the office. Again, whole day of interviews. I've been through 4 interviews, I've been through the lunch meeting, and there's a break. But this time, and there are lots of other candidates. Everybody's very anxious because, an offer at Mckinsey, number 1 recruiter at MBA schools at that time, means a lot, right? It could change your life. So, but this time, I'm not worked up. I'm really relaxed. And so I go for final interview. And, it goes well. I come back. Before I reach home, I have an offer. The single biggest difference, as I later reflected, was I was not afraid to fail. Failing did not mean a big thing, and I think I had, conditioned my mind during that 1 year period in between, reflected that why did I fail the first time? Because I was too anxious. But this time when I went, I was not anxious about the future. I was not reflecting on the past. I was in the present, in the moment, and I genuinely enjoy case interviews, and so it went well. So I think that's my biggest learning. So I think it strengthened the courage, to go for a bigger decision without worrying about failure. And I think that I credit that failure at Mckinsey.
Amazing. So an amazing career in Schlumberger, then an MBA, then a consultant, then Forbes list of young leaders, Belden, entrepreneur, built it successfully, angel investor. What next for Naresh Kumra?
That sounds a lot better than it actually is, but thank you, Ash, for the kind words. I don't know actually. I do know. I've had 6-year stints. 6 years at Schlumberger, 6 years at Mckinsey, 6 years at Darden, and I just finished 6 years at Jmatek.
Okay.
But the difference this time is I'm really enjoying learning what I'm doing. I can't wait for Monday morning to go to work, and I absolutely love the people I work with. So, and I have a lot to do still. So I don't know. So we'll see where it goes. But this so far so good, and I hope it continues for a lot longer. So we'll see.
Naresh, thank you very much. Your words of wisdom have been absolutely incredible. I've always had a lot of respect for you. I'm sure thousands of people who listen to our podcast will really enjoy listening to everything you've said. Thank you for flying down from Hong Kong and coming.
Thank you, Ash. It's an honor.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You podcast. Be sure to visit tbcy.in to join the conversation, access show notes, and discover fantastic bonus content. You can follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Simply search for The Brand Called You. Thank you, and see you next week.